Excited to introduce the speaker today. When I think of Sarah, this is someone who really shows that you get out of this program what you put into it. And we've been working together a little over a year and a half. And she takes almost all of my suggestions, which is amazing. Anyone that's sponsored anyone knows that that's very, very rare. And it's really apparent that working this program has changed her life. And she works all three of the legacies. She's gotten involved with fellowship. She has a service position and she works a program of recovery. She works her steps and she sponsors other women, and she's just an amazing person. So I'm really excited to hear her story. Sarah.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah, and I'm an alcoholic. So nice to be with this packed room this morning. It makes me emotional because I look around the room and I recognize almost every single one of you, and I've heard something that you have said that has helped me stay sober. So the fact that I get to be up here and do it for you guys is truly a miracle for me. And it's also nice to know that you guys get to take some of this information and you guys all get to hold it and I can get rid of this crap. So so yeah, I haven't had a drink in over 4 years, but my sobriety date, my recovery starts February 20th of 2023. And I have a home group. I'm part of the YPAW Young People's Group in Missoula, and I would love to see all of you there. It just means young at heart. So whatever, I know we all are. We'd love to see you. It's Friday nights at 7:30 at the Church of the Noon group. And yeah, like Mary said, I try to work the program as it says, and some of those I was reluctant. And it's funny that she even said she's started work, part of the fellowship now too. That was something that probably took me the longest. And I think if you hear my story, that's probably, you might start to understand. So, like I said, I stopped drinking in November of 2020, and I thought that that was going to solve my problems. And there is a celebrity who's one of us, and we've talked about that. He said, if you want to see alcoholism at work, get an alcoholic and have them stop drinking, and then you'll see alcoholism at work. And that was true for me in those 2.5 psychotic years I spent alone in my house, and my world was caving in on me, and I didn't know what to do. And that's just a testament that this disease can kill you and you don't even have to drink. And so, I mean, being an alcoholic was something I was proud of, something that it was almost something I knew that I was long before I ever started drinking. And by that I mean I just felt very different from everyone around me. And I couldn't really I didn't know why, but I just knew I was different. And I used that as a badge of honor to burn bridges, to screw people over, to just be like, whatever, if you can't join me, that's on you. Sucks to be you, right? And that's just kind of how I was. But I I have a lot of protective mechanisms built in, right? There's this movie, it's I think it's called Where the Crawdads Sing, and or whatever that movie is, but she says every living thing does what it needs to do to survive. And that is true from a cellular level all the way to whatever you want to talk about, group behavior. And that's what I did. So I come from a family, I am one of 4 kids. I'm the second oldest. I'm the oldest daughter. And when they say the oldest daughter's the man of the house, that shit is true. And I was out of the 4 of us kids, I sort of took on this behavior as being like the golden child. So I have I had a conversation with my therapist before I had ever found recovery. And I said, how do people become alcoholics? And she said, there's three factors. And that is, you can have a family history of it. You can have a history of mental disorder in your family, and geographic location where you grew up. And I was like, okay, check, 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 right? And but there was no solution built in that. So knowing that information didn't really do me any good, but whatever. So my job, I felt growing up, was to be the stable one. I came from, my parents drank, my grandparents drank. I mixed drinks for my grandpa, who was like a prominent banker in Montana. I made him martinis, and we joked about, just make grandpa some prune juice, like that's what the joke was. And then I'd see my parents fight, my grandparents fight, and we'd have to like leave the family gathering, whatever. But so I took on this job to like make sure everybody around me was okay. And that shit, it didn't, I started going crazy. Like it was a sort of a sad existence, but it also became a game for me because it was like, if I can make you think I'm okay, make you think something about me, then the rest of this is just sort of silly, right? Um, so something about my family too is they were geographic. Like we moved a lot. I don't have lots of memories of many grades up until third grade, where I finally found a small town. I grew up in Northeast Montana, and I graduated high school with 50 other kids, and we all really knew each other. Everyone knew everything about one another, and so I call that place home. But what's funny is I played all the sports. I did all the extracurricular activities. I was homecoming queen, whatever. But I was miserable. I was miserable. And I have diaries from growing up of like how I just wanted to kill myself. Just the things I was taking on from such a young age, like, why are my parents doing this? And why can't I just take their sadness away and my sister's mental disorder away? And like all this chaos that I was just holding on to. And but on the outside it seemed like everything was okay. And yeah, it just so finally when I got to Missoula for college and I found this group of friends that used like I did and experimented with drugs like I did, and like we didn't have to go to class anymore and we could just drink, I thought I like died and went to heaven. And that's what I did. And so from there I think things just got really dark for me, right? Like I I talk about like my drinking as a badge of honor. Like I loved it that I could be the homecoming queen, but I could also like chug a beer and take a bong rip and snort a line and then blow out the bong rip, and then people in the room would be like, I've never seen anyone do that, let alone a girl. And so I'd be like and like and so it was like all sort of a game to me. And but then it just got to, I don't know, so whatever. So yeah, there's that life that's going on for me. When I was, so family chaos, that's a part of my story, right? And I don't know, I hear people say like long time ago, I would say, yeah, I grew up in an alcoholic home. But I don't know if my parents and my grandparents were alcoholic. I don't know if they suffered the way I did. I don't know if they just wanted to stop, if they had enough, right? And that's what alcoholism is for me, is how much am I willing to suffer and before I want to change. And so my grandparents didn't stop drinking. They died when they were in their 80s. They hadn't stopped drinking. So who am I to call them an alcoholic? And when we say things like the only thing I know how to do is drink, sometimes I come back to that because that is kind of the only thing I know how to do on my own. But I need you guys to teach me how to do everything else. And so who am I to say to call someone an alcoholic? That's something we have to do on our own. And that keeps me humble, and that keeps me in a place of forgiveness. I can forgive my parents for some of the things that I went through. I can forgive my grandparents for the things that I went through, because these people are human. Just because my mom is my mom doesn't mean she's supposed to be a perfect mom. She is a lot more than just my mother. And so I wouldn't ever put that pressure on her to fulfill my needs entirely. And I wouldn't do that to myself. I have a 5-year-old son and I can't do that to myself. So, um, so anyways, family chaos and, and, uh, when my dad, okay, so this is a part of my story, is when I was 21 years old, which was perfect timing, right? I'm 21 years old and my dad was diagnosed with leukemia. And for a family that didn't know how to even talk about like, what you did at school that day or, what was happening in your life, how were we going to handle a cancer diagnosis? And so that sent this really insane like thing for my through my family, and that's what it became all about. And suddenly my dad's suffering became my suffering, and it became everybody's suffering. And it wasn't just the fact that my dad was dying of cancer, but it was that my dad couldn't fulfill what he wanted to do, right? Because we lived off of if then statements. I remember him being like, well, when I retire I'll be happy, and when we move to California I'll be happy. And like we lived off of if then statements constantly, and we forgot to just be in the moment, right? And so for a year and a half my dad battled cancer, and it was horrible. It was like a horrible thing to have to watch my brothers carry him up the stairs, and um my mom changed diapers, and like all of these things that were happening, and we couldn't talk about it, and I was actively using through it. And it was a really sad time of my life, right? And so and what's funny is, so I running away is a big part of my story, right? As an alcoholic, I do that uh like figuratively and literally. I run away constantly. And I think that came from moving a lot as a child. And then also my parents had tried to move me as a sophomore in high school. They moved me to Helena, and I 6 months later got in the car and ran away back to Glasgow, and where I grew up. And so I was like constantly running away. And so when my dad got cancer, I was in school for surgical technology as a scrub tech, and you could take an internship in Medford, Oregon. And I was like, that's where I'm going. I'm getting the hell out of here, and I can't witness this anymore. And so I just kept running away. And something happened. Something happened. So it's like, as far away from God as I was through my addiction, there were moments of spiritual awakenings that happened that I'm kind of like learning about now. But like a few days before my dad died, so Medford is about a 14-hour drive from here. And my mom was like, I don't know what's happening, but I think it's time. I think he's gonna, it's not, we're not gonna make it. And my dad was in such denial. So here he is, he wears diapers, all of his vertebrae and his back are broken. He's skin and bones. You can't even touch him and he'll bruise. And my mom had asked him, I'm going to the store. Do not get up, because you cannot get up. Like, I have to be here. I have to just run to the store. Anyone who's been a caretaker knows the toll that that takes on somebody. And what did my dad do? He got up and he fell. And so when she got home, there was a pool of blood in our kitchen, and like all of his skin had come off of his foot. And and so now he's got this wound on his foot that won't heal. And he goes, well, maybe they could just amputate it. Like, that's how in denial he was about it, right? And so, and we're all just looking around like, what the is going on, and in the meantime, there's like packages coming from Amazon that he ordered because he's like, I'm gonna wear that swimsuit on the boat this summer. And I'm like, what is going on? So it's just like, it was, yeah, anyways. Um, so the doctor's like, he's not gonna make it. He's gonna die. And you could tell he was starting to go. And I was at work and I was like, I don't know what's happening, but I have to leave. Like, I was just like, I have to leave and I have to get in my car and I gotta go. And so I did, and I made it. And I think I drove about 10 hours. I almost made it through the night. And then I finally get back to Helena, where he eventually dies. And I made it within about 4 hours of him dying. And so we were all there. And it was finally a moment where we could have this intimate, um, you know, experience with my dad's dead body, and I could finally touch him and I knew it didn't hurt him, you know? And what's cool about that is, so my dad really loved old cars. And on the way home from the drive from Oregon, where I started following this like 76 Triumph, which was like his favorite car, that he had one when we were in Glasgow, and he would say, "Do you want to go for a ride, Sarahs?" And I'd be like, "No." That thing like breaks down, and I don't want to be seen with my parents, like that's not cool. And so like looking back, it's just like kind of sad, but I did follow that car home, and they made it before he died. And yeah, and as anyone knows someone who's sick, I remember being like, I wish he would just die. This is horrible. And then when he dies, it's a complete different story. And that catapulted my drinking, I would say. I guess it did. I don't know. Into this new dimension where I just got to drink, and I got to escape. And so the way that I look at my dad's death now is that I'm almost great. I can't do anything about him dying. I can't do a thing, but what I can do is like be really grateful that his death expedited my drinking in a way that I don't want to drink anymore, and I'm not out there anymore. So I'm extremely grateful that I had this kind of like emotionally neglectful father that loved me very much. Like I know he loved me in the ways that he knew how to love me. And he's able to teach me lessons more in his death than he was able to in his life. And he and I have a very good relationship. And we continue to, and he continues to teach me things that he probably couldn't have done if he was still alive. And I get to say that to a room of people who understand what that means, Because I have friends that even say, you wouldn't have been an alcoholic if your dad was still alive. And I'm like, I was always an alcoholic, I always was. But maybe this did expedite it in a way, and that's to me not how alcoholism works. So that was a part of my life. Another part of that was I wanted everyone to think I was okay. Shortly after that happened. So I wound up getting married. Ah. um, and I married such a good man. Like he is so sweet and kind and like just a good man. And here's another thing. I'm not sure I would have gotten sober as soon as I did, just because I mean we were very different and I was pretty miserable and I felt like my world was caving in on me. But he also was the first normal drinker that I had ever met. And I would start to ask him questions like, okay, so we just went out for 2 drinks and you're not thinking about more drinks? And he's like, no. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, and then I'm like, and your childhood. Why are you talking about your childhood? You remember? And he's like, yeah, and so it started me like this thing of being like, maybe I wonder if I wanted any of this, and what is going on here. And you know what? Just because someone's a nice man and kind and very sweet, like, doesn't mean he's my person for the rest of my life in the way that we have to be together forever. He can still be my person in the way that we're going to keep going through this, right? And keep figuring this out. And he's the dad to my son. And thank God I picked somebody like him. Like, I was able to drink through some of those like infant stages of my son's birth and stuff, and I knew that he was there and he took care of him because I couldn't, I didn't know how, but whatever. So I got married and I'm getting I'm getting divorced right now and we're navigating that. And that was something too that I said, but he's so nice. And like, what is wrong with me that I'm so miserable? And it wasn't until one of you guys said, okay, but wait, what is so nice about keeping your world small? And I was like, should I never heard it like that before, And so yeah, so that starts. But yeah, I remember getting pregnant and I was like a dry drunk. Oh my God. My mom even said it, you're a dry drunk. And I'm like, what do you know? But anyways, I was so angry. I was so angry. And my pregnancy was more of a countdown as to when I could start drinking again than it was you know, just being grateful I was, you know, pregnant. And then even so, I remember having him and being like, so when can I drink again? Like I was clinging to anything familiar, like just any familiar side of me. And the only thing familiar about me was that I drank and I wanted that again. And and so like there was a time, and this was kind of like this turning point, like awakening of my husband had gone out of town and he really hadn't gone out of town very often. And my son was probably 9 months old. And I I was like, oh shit, like I'll have one drink when my husband leaves, right? And then all of a sudden I was blacked out, and my son was like swaddled in the bed next to me. And I wound up waking up to him crying, and he's like not moving. He's just like 9 months old. And I wake up to him kind of next to me, and he's looking at me like, when are you gonna wake up? And a 9-month-old baby, like the look in a little baby's eyes was so profound that I was like, something's got to give here, that scared the shit out of me. And all of a sudden I remember these things were happening. Like I tried to go out after that and I wound up, like my husband said, all of a sudden you would turn into Gumby. And like I started like smashing my face off the sidewalks like downtown, and I had black eyes and a broken cheek, and I just couldn't stop no matter what I was doing. And so I remember I looked at my husband and I said, I don't know what's happening, but like the world is buzzing around me, like literal vibrations, and I don't know what's happening, but I think I have to stop drinking. And he was like, yeah, yeah, you probably do. But he never shamed me into it. And he has said too that like it was always something he probably knew that he was like getting himself into, that it would be something I would have to stop one day, but I don't think he realized he was going to get divorced out of it, right? But but anyway, um so I had a baby, and I thought, yeah, so I had to stop drinking. And I remember being like, it's going to make me fit inside this box of how other people live. And I wanted to be normal, and I wanted to be like a normie drinker, but I knew I couldn't, but I could still hang out with the normal people, right? The normal people. And all of a sudden, like after 2.5 years of not drinking, and I was miserable, I was like, and all I wanted to do was literally like kill myself. When I say this disease will kill you even without a drink, I'm talking jails, institutions, or death. Like death means I will kill myself if I like this disease is going to lead to that. And so voices were starting to tell me like, just drop your son off at your in-laws and that's fine, and he's young enough now and he won't remember you, and like that was starting to happen. And it was when a friend saw me, and she's a nurse, and she said, you know what, I've never seen you like this before, and we've got to get you some help. And just go to the hospital, see if there's any labs like they could do or whatever. And they did, and all the labs came back normal. And that's where I realized like this is a self-diagnosis and I can't do this on my own anymore. And so I went to AA and, and it was like it was the last house on the left or whatever, right? Because I thought I could educate my way out of this. I was training for a marathon. I was, I had a house and a marriage and a kid, and I had all those things, and I was still miserable and I was going to kill myself. So I went to AA, and so when we talk about the steps, I knew I was powerless. I knew my life was unmanageable. And then when I met my sponsor, who I went up to that day, and I was just kind of a nut, and I was like, I don't know what to do. Like, I haven't had a drink in a really long time. My life sucks, And she's like, okay. Well, we've got the solution, and she goes, you could work the steps on your own if you want, but when you get to step 3, you can't. And I was like, what the hell does that mean? Because I remember like getting to step 3 and being like, what does that mean? Do we get on our knees and like have this ritualistic thing? And it's like, no, it means that you don't do it on your own anymore. And so I did. I just started doing what she told me to do. And I'm really I'm kind of, I do what you tell me to do, right? Like that's what yeah. I find solutions in that. But the whole parts of the fellowship, that was the thing for me. Like I knew go to meetings, get a home group or do some service, but the fellowship thing was sort of hard for me. And I think that stems from, so when I say, that we part of we admitted we were powerless over alcohol. When I came to AA, it was like they admitted they were powerless over alcohol. And I would see you guys together and I'd be like, that's great. That's something they have, but that's not something I have, because I was used to like just leave as soon as something gets problematic, just run away. Wherever I go, I know my exits, like just as we all do. But these were the rooms where people came in and we say those things and we all say, oh, yeah, I know how that feels. So it took me a while to say, like, we means I am a part of this. So looking around the room and recognizing all of you is like a freaking miracle for me, because I feel so a part of, and yeah, so that was, I went through steps 1, 2, and 3, and I started to see like my past is my past and had to happen exactly this way. I remember that was something when I was trying to like read myself out of into emotional sobriety, and I would read all these self-help books, and um they'd say you're exactly where you're supposed to be, and I thought that was the biggest crock of shit. and and I never understood that until I got to step 3, really. Yeah, and then steps 4 and 5 were so funny because so all that work that I did alone in my house by myself, not drinking. Um, um, I met with my sponsor and we're like getting ready for steps 4 and 5. And I show up and I literally have two things on it. That's it. 2 people, 2 resentments. And and I was like dead serious. Like I wasn't avoiding it or anything. I was just like, I've got 2. And she's like, okay, where are the rest? And I was like, what are you talking about? I was like, I dealt with all that stuff in my head already. And, and, and she's like, no, get out a pen. And we started talking about, oh yeah, one time when I was a kid, like my sister ripped out all my journal pages of my notebook and I had to get therapy when I was in high school. She's like, yeah, that sounds like a resentment. You could probably write that down, like, and I was like, oh, this is really coming up. And so I learned that talking about myself is really uncomfortable. I don't, sometimes I'm like, I don't know, why does anybody care? Like, why does anybody care? And also, why do we get so worked up about all these things? I don't know. That's something I'm dealing with. But when my life really started to change, I think I was about 9 or 10 months into recovery, and I was on step 6 and 7. And I try to figure out why I love step 6 and 7 so much. Like those are my steps, right? And and I think about what I was going through at that time. And those were moments that I really started to get back in my body. Um, my body was not somewhere I wanted to be. You know, I grew up in a house. My sister punched me in the face when I was asleep on Christmas morning when I was like 16. You know, like that's the house we grew up in. Like I would grab her ponytail and rip her out of a chair like she didn't even know I was there. You know, like we were always pulling shit on each other, and like I could go even worse, but I won't. And and so I had to get back in my body. And when I talk about like getting married too, I did that for everybody else. I wanted everybody else to think that I was okay. And inside I wasn't, but I wasn't spending any time with myself to know that I wasn't okay. And so 6 and 7, when they say, you know, through prayer and meditation, that's what I started to do. And I would go to my sponsor and be like, I meditated for a minute. Like, you won't even believe this shit. Like, I did it. And then I'd be like, I've got 8 minutes, you know, and I'd be like, I can meditate for 10 minutes. And like, I'm like, all of a sudden, like getting less like squirrely, and I'm able to talk to people in public, and I'm, you know, things were happening professionally for me. And I was like, you know how they just talk about it just falls into place and you don't even know why, and but you're just doing the next right thing. And that's what step 6 and 7 did for me. And I got to know me. um you know what's funny is, so I love the movie Titanic. It's the best movie ever. And and because as a kid, when it came out, I thought the story was about Jack and Rose, and they have this intense 3-day relationship before the unsinkable ship sinks, right? And what is Rose gonna do, you know? And like, and that was me when I was a kid, like this romantic love affair. And I was all about the love addiction and the, you know, just the romance and the hype and blah blah blah. And it's not about Jack and Rose. That movie's about Rose finding herself. At the end, like you see it, she goes on like horseback and like becomes the woman she always wanted to be. And that's what recovery is, you know? Our addictions, my addiction took me so far from myself. I remember looking down at my clothes. I was like sitting in a sandbox. My son was 13 months old. I was like, what the hell am I wearing? You know, I had like floral pajama pants on, and I was like, I don't even know what is happening. I don't know who this is. And and um and so getting to know myself has been one of the most like miraculous parts of this. And you know, it's so simple, really. Like they say, recovery is so simple, but it doesn't mean it's easy. And it doesn't mean you're going to like the person that you know, start to discover, and or like what you've done or whatever. But I'm going to get through it because I'm sober. So I'm going to be okay. And that's what I forget is like I'm going through a divorce, and um it's hard, you know, I have a 5-year-old, and it's hard, and he and I cry together sometimes, and we're like, I don't know why we can't just all live together, you know, but he's not he's not alone in his sadness, and he sees a mom who's vulnerable. And you know, I could have just been passed out, and he'd be like, when the hell is my mom gonna wake up? I mean, who knows? I don't know, but I'm sober today, and that's all I know. And yeah. And anyway, so I just think this whole like getting to know myself is just, it's just so cool. And every like there's always something around the corner. um Doing amends kind of was funny. And you know what's so cool about the literature is it speaks to people who have 5 days of sobriety. You're able to interpret it a certain way, and it also works for people who have 50 years. And that's what's so cool about this book is that we can dissect it along the way, and it can mean something different for us whenever we need it. And so in steps 8 and 9, if it said, write down who you wronged, it's really not that big of a deal, we'd be like, no, it's a huge deal. What are you talking about? Like early in recovery. And then when you go along the line and you just do it, you're like, what the hell have I been hanging on to about myself this whole time? Right. So a very big amends that I made was to my mom. And I also do a living amends to my dad like all the time, but like daily I work through that and talk to him. But to my mom, it's really interesting because what I thought I was making an amends for turned out to be not even her perspective at all. And what I learned about myself is that I was a really angry and unsafe person to be around. And that was very eye-opening for me, because I saw how this disease was making me a very unpredictable person, and I was losing people left and right because they were afraid of me, and so I got through that with my mom, and some of the things that I've done with my friends, I realized like, who cares? Who cares? Like, I mean, some of the things that they like know about me and that I've had to like clean up, I don't do that stuff anymore. And I also don't even like really hang out with them anymore. And like, I live a totally different life and I've kept my side of the street clean, and we all have our own lives, all of these things going on. And, and so I just think it's so funny because I'm like, I'm interpreting this book so much differently now too. And things are really changing for me. And then, with step 10, I've been keeping a nightly inventory. And what's so interesting is the things, I started a gratitude journal, and I am realizing that I only remember the bad stuff about my day and the things that maybe I could have done better and the things that like I really didn't do that well. And until it says like when the prompt is what brought you joy that day, I have to like really think about it because I forget. And I'm like, whoa, that's how my brain's been working all these years. And so that was a new thing that's kind of interesting. And then I try to be of service as much as I can, but without being stretched thin. I think there's one thing to be really excited about recovery and about doing service work, but I also know that I can only do so much. And a part of loving myself is also creating really like healthy boundaries, right? And so when I have this, like, I have a pretty good life right now, and my life is sacred. Like my body, like this is all very sacred to me, and like I'm protecting it at all costs. So if somebody makes me feel uncomfortable, if I don't want to go to Christmas and hang out with a certain family member, guess what? I don't have to. And if that upsets people, that's not on me. That's not my thing to carry. And these steps have taught me to be very patient. Just because something's not working out now, it doesn't mean it's always not going to work out. So I've grown patient and I've grown very protective. And yeah. And I love that about it. Like it's such a superpower to be able to say that about my life um because when we say like it could drive us back to insanity or drinking, it's true. So this is like something kind of trivial, but at work the other day, I'm within the first 6 months of my job, and it's a job that is uncomfortable, like tests my boundaries a little bit. Like it's a cool like professional job, right? And something happened when I was on the phone with a client, and I was supposed to like press this button for disclaimers to be read, and it didn't work. And it was like one of the first conversations like this that I was having. And I was like, oh shit. But all of a sudden, I literally thought of you guys. Like it went into, remember when I used to get scared to read how it works? And and now I don't care. Like, so all I did was just I started reading it and I just started doing my thing. And the whole time I wasn't even thinking about work. I was just thinking about you guys and like the rooms. And it just got me right through it. And everyone at my work was like, that was really good. And I was like, it was, but it was just this cool, like, how much we can apply this program to our lives and how it keeps us sane and it protects my sanity. Because I could have just fumbled through that, told myself I was a piece of shit, gone out that night or whatever, or just my old behaviors, and it would have been right back, if not 10 steps back. And this is a miracle program. My life has grown and it continues to expand, and I'm curious about others. And I'm less curious about myself, but more in tune to how I feel. It's a weird, like, balancing act all the time, but that's what recovery is. We're just in constant equilibrium, and then we see something when we start to fall off this side. Well, then we got to get back. And I am, like, my sponsor told me, you're a highly motivated person. I wouldn't have told myself that. I needed someone else to tell me that. And so she goes, if you're not checking all the boxes, you're gonna fall out of balance. So I have to exercise, I have to read, I have to be spiritual, I have to feed myself and sleep, or else I can break out into manic episodes or like whatever it is, or I can start calling people names or ripping them out of chairs by their ponytail. And it's not good for me. So and I just know that if it can take this, like, chaotic, like, I remember people would always say when I was growing up, they're like, why do you laugh at everything? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, it was just, but it was such a defense mechanism, right? I just never wanted anyone to see anything past like skin level, right? And so at least if I was laughing about something, they'd just be like, well, nothing bothers her, I guess. So if this program can help somebody like me get back in touch with myself, that is a miracle. And I am so curious about you guys too. I love the way our brains work and how we can take this program and make it ours. So if something doesn't seem right to you, it's gonna seem right. Like, make it yours. We're creative. This is a blank canvas as to how we want our lives to go. And yeah. And I don't know. I guess I'll wrap it up, but I love you guys so much. Like, I'm serious when I say that. And I'm super excited just about recovery and what it does for people. And I can't say that I'll never drink again. I don't know that, right? But I know one day at a time I can get through this, and I can be patient with myself, and I can have grace with the process. And I love you guys. I'm glad I got to be here today. Thank you all so much.